we're examining enterprise technology and transformation. Of course, that includes AI and implications for chief information officers. Our guest is Peter Altabef, the chair and CEO of Unisys.
Unisys today is about a $2 billion revenue company. About 80% of our business is really integrating third-party software, putting it together, and then using it on behalf of clients. But about 20% of our business is really our own proprietary software that we license to clients and implement. So we have a bit of a foot in both the solutions world and the pure software development world. So we kind of do both right now.
Peter, we're all focused on AI. What kinds of investments in AI is Unisys making? And also, what's the impact of AI on Unisys?
We track AI throughout the company. And currently, the most recent report I got, which was about 5 days ago, is we have 135 AI projects going on. So we do it at scale. We tend to look at AI through a couple of different lenses, Michael. The first is it generative or is it non-generative? Some people call it traditional. It's kind of weird to call it traditional when it's relatively new. Some people call it prescriptive because it tends to be more exact than generative. But if we think about AI in history, Steven Spielberg came out with a movie called AI, Artificial Intelligence, in 2001. So it was 23 years ago. And whether we talk about machine learning or deep learning, all of that has been around for 20 years. So when I use the term AI, I tend to combine traditional AI and generative AI. That said, generative AI, which is about 3 to 4 years old, has really changed the game dramatically. So we can veer off into those. When we think about AI in the company, we think about 3 lenses. The lens where we're putting AI directly into our client solutions and where our clients will use the AI themselves. That, if you will, is the solution element. The second element is where we're using AI in providing services to clients. I'll give you an example. When we think about code generation today is making use not just of deep learning and machine learning, but generative AI. And so code generation, our application development team, is about 50% more productive than they were 3 years ago, because that's how much of a difference AI has made. So it's our service of our client as opposed to what our client does with our stuff. And then the third element is almost back office. So it's how do you use AI and Gen AI in the marketing department? How do you use it in finance? How do you use it in legal? How do you use it in client development? And so we tend to think of it through those 3 lenses.
You mentioned that you have about 135 AI-related projects going on. What's the general state of maturity? In other words, to what extent are these projects proofs of concept or actually in production or rolling out at scale?
We tend to measure them by proof of concept, by pilots, or by production. Those are the 3 categories. It's about a third at this point. So, it's moving remarkably quickly. And, even Gen AI is moving into production very, very quickly. That's true about our client solutions, working with clients. It's also true about how we're supporting our clients and even our back office. So it's pretty evenly spaced at this point. And when you're sitting down with a client, whether it's a CIO or a CEO or CFO, it's a bit unfair because you can drive value in a lot of different ways, but it is accurate that you get their attention when you start talking about Gen AI. I mean, all of the media attention has made them more aware. And so you're going to get, if you think about how, are people paying attention to you at a 7 or an 8 or an 11? When you get to Gen AI, you get to 11.
What about the use cases and the levels of investment that your customers are making in AI today? What are you seeing with that?
What we have done is we have kind of put aside an investment kitty for anything that a business team wants to invest in beyond their existing budgets. And that investment kitty is available to people, but requires, a return on investment or an ROI. The rest of the budget for AI, we have said, look, guys, get used to it being ordinary course. It is like air, it's like water. Every company is doing this all the time. So while you can come to us for specific investments, rethink your existing investments, because a lot of people have what I call the old John Lindsay approach, and I will date myself. John was the mayor of New York, and he was a popular mayor. And when he became mayor, he went to the police department and said, "We're going to cut your budget." And the police department said, "Well, we can't go on strike, but and we will do whatever you tell us. But 100% of the budget cuts will come from police men and women off the street." In other words, they were not going to cut their back office at all, which is the opposite of what he wanted. And often, Michael, when you talk to a team and they ask you for more budget relief on a specific thing, it's always because it's the most valuable thing in their coffer. But they very rarely talk about the least valuable thing in their coffer. And the real issue about budgets is you want to compare the new investment against the least important thing they're doing, not against the most important thing. That's the way we've approached AI. And so we really said, to the extent you can, we really want you to fund this through your existing budgets. And that's a more disciplined approach than some, but we think that it's the right approach.
That would be a slower approach as well, because they've got to find the money, they have to prioritize the investment as they would any other project, and stays away from AI being the shiny object that we must invest in today no matter what.
It might be a slower approach if the CEO didn't get a report every 2 weeks about what every group was doing in AI. So we really have kind of turned that on its head a little bit and said, we expect you to do it within your existing budget other than for a special investment kitty. But by the way, your CEO is going to get a report every 2 weeks on what you're doing. So we think that provides a little more of an impetus to get it done.
So really then the implication of this is a certain kind of investment discipline to make sure that you're not chasing, wild objects without application to the appropriate business case. Would that be another way of saying it?
It would. And when we started to test this and we started to report on it internally, I've got a report here. So in April of last year, we had 51 projects. As of last month, we have 135 projects. So, clearly we're getting traction within the company.
And what about your customers? Are you seeing the same kind of thing, that level of traction inside your customers today?
We are. And when you did the introduction, you talked about CIOs, Michael. And I would say CIOs have historically been the most likely client for Unisys, but still probably are, but to a much less extent. Because the extent to which you start to have solutions that dramatically move the revenue of the company forward, then all of a sudden your chief commercial officer cares. To the extent that you start having solutions that put your client at the forefront of their market, then all of a sudden the CEO cares. And so it's more than about, an incremental advance in technology. It's more about only saving money. Well, that's part of the equation. So you tend to move up into other elements of the C level. And that's really important for us. And I think and Gen AI has probably been the poster child for a new technology that has been more seriously advanced by boards of directors than the cloud, certainly than, if you go back in time, client server. I mean, it's a technology movement that has had more higher level interest than any I can recall.
Would it be the case then that there is an understanding among the CEOs that you're talking with that AI and then Gen AI specifically can lead to, can we say, innovation breakthroughs or benefit as opposed to driving merely, quote unquote, merely driving efficiency, meaning lower cost or faster speed, but still doing the same thing that we always have done?
What Gen AI in particular has done, even more than machine learning and deep learning, is opened up the imagination. I mean, you really can think about your company and think about what you provide to your clients in ways that you could never even imagine before. And that imagination, it really gets the excitement of C-level executives. It gets the excitement of a lot of people inside companies. And I think you quickly realize, it's a different decision-making matrix because the imagination can only be fired if you understand the tool. So when we started this journey, really in February of last year, one of the things we started to do at our company was say, if you really want to highlight the art of the possible, you have to make sure everybody is educated in this. So we opened up our Gen AI training not only to the people who were currently had a specific business use, but to everybody in the company. And we have now between 96 and 97% of our company has taken Gen AI training. Now we have more advanced training, but everybody is learning about Gen AI, already has. And then for the more advanced training, we kind of had a little bit of a mind-blowing idea. Not only did we say that we created 5 personas. And so each persona is based off what a job is in the company and how you can best use Gen AI. And so we have 5 different advanced personas, but we opened up the training to everybody in the company. It doesn't matter whether your job is in one of those 5. You can get trained in one of those 5 or all 5, because we thought this was a point in time where, from a career tracking purpose, we want people to think about what the job they want, not the job they have. And that means getting trained in Gen AI applications for the job they want to have. So it's all about the imagination, and it's all about the art of the possible. That really, I mean, it differentiates this from some technology advances in the past, which were useful, but not as imaginative.
As the CEO of Unisys, you're driving this awareness and training of Gen AI deeply through the company. Why are you doing this? And how do you know that this is a good investment other than the intuition? It seems like a good thing to do.
For a couple of reasons. First, as I said, when you talk to your clients, this is the subject that gets them most excited. They go from a 7 to a 9 to an 11. And obviously you want to have those discussions. So number one, the clients are most interested. Secondly, the reality of it is this is where you can make breakthroughs. I mean, when we're talking with clients in travel and transportation or in retail or restaurants or banking, any of those sectors, the solutions you can talk to them about will move their business not only from a cost savings, but from a revenue generation. And if you want to talk to a client, you want to get them excited, you talk about revenue generation. You talk about new areas where they can expand. You can talk about them advancing over their competitors. Yes, they're interested in cost savings. They always will be, but this is a different dialogue. This is really a value add in a way that materially helps their business. So it's not just the hype, Michael. It's the reality of it. The things we're doing for clients now using Gen AI are honestly things that they could not do before. And it's opening up business advantages to them that they didn't have before.
That directly addresses that innovation versus efficiency issue, that this is directly tied to innovation and therefore increase of revenue, customer satisfaction, whatever it might be.
It really does. It's a good test for the viability of the technology. If the technology is only saving you money, that's okay. That's a good thing, and you can measure it on a pretty, existing ROI scale. But if the technology allows you to expand your market share or expand your movement into different areas that wasn't accessible to you, that's a different kind of value. And of course, over time, first movers or second movers get to expand market share. And at some point, that becomes defensive too, because the rest of the market catches up to you.
Please subscribe to our newsletter and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We have amazing shows coming up. Let's take some questions from Twitter. And this is from Arslan Khan, who's a regular listener, and Arslan always asks great questions. And he says, from the top executive view, it might seem that companies are all in on quote unquote doing AI, but how do you become aware of resistance from the bottom up? Any lessons learned or frameworks? And I was going to ask this question in a different way, but really the same thing is, what does this kind of training do to the culture and the change that this is now driving?
Already talked about two of the three ways we've tried to put this into our culture. One, obviously, is you have our board as well as other boards and the C-level people asking about it. That's why I get a report. The second is you want to make sure that everybody understands it so that they can be imaginative. So that's why you train everybody in the company. There's a third element to that. And the third element, I really give credit to Palo Alto. So we try to be a student of what other companies are doing. And we found Palo Alto really had a best practice in this, in the way that they kind of took a certain number of their middle level leadership, if you will, and they really invested in that team. So they created very specific projects that were company wide with high visibility and timelines and metrics. And they said, we as a company are going to do this. And by the way, folks, we need you guys to lead this. And they have regular meetings of that, if you will, middle level of people that if you don't get their hearts and minds, then we call that permafrost. So we borrowed that with their permission, and we have got that now in our company as well. And I will tell you, that's been a little bit of the secret sauce between a C-level effort and a homegrown effort. You have to get that permafrost to be a force of good as opposed to be a force of resistance.
How do you accomplish that? Resistance to change is an endemic part of any transformation effort, regardless of what it is. After all, it comes back to human nature. So how do you do that?
The people leading those company-wide efforts are not C-level people. The people leading those company-wide efforts are, if you will, those middle folks who get an opportunity to get very, very high profile. And it's not one person. We have 9 of those. And for each of those 9, we've created a group of people from around the company that are actively working together. So I hate to be, I don't want to put a false note on this, but you have to get them enlisted and you have to make them part of the solution. Now, as I said, every company will do it differently, but that has really worked for us. And we think it's a really good effort.
If you don't get the body of folks inside the company behind you, then ultimately any type of major transformation effort is not going to succeed. And you may not even know why exactly. You just know things are not working. Why isn't this happening the way it should? Because it makes so much sense.
Keep in mind, a company like ours, Michael, not only has to do it for our own efficiency, but if we don't do it effectively for our clients, it affects our ability to expand our revenues. It affects our ability to expand our margin. So one of our clear tests is, are we bringing those solutions to our clients? And are our clients, really embracing those solutions? I will say this is also new territory, because usually for companies like ours, you go to a client with 80% of the solution figured out, and then you customize it for the client. That percentage is probably a little less here because not only is the solution have to be customized, the imagination has to be customized. You have to understand your client could be thinking about something you haven't even realized, but you know how to use the technology in a way the client may not. So it really becomes, I mean, what we like to say is that there's no invented here at our company. And I think that that's true for most good companies. And it's a very roll up your sleeve and work at creating something new with your clients. And you have an efficiency standpoint. If everything is brand new, every time you walk into a client, it's not very efficient for you or the client. And the client expects you to come with a methodology, with IP, with a solution. But more of the solution is now custom made because of this imagination quotient than we've seen in the past.
This is from Chris Peterson on Twitter. And Chris is another regular listener who also asks great questions. And Chris says, the journey from 50-ish AI projects to 130-ish in 18 months is interesting, but how many have been completed and achieved their ROI projections in that time?
We have about a third of those in production now. And to get into production, you have to hit those ROI targets. So I would say that the track record is pretty good. And the 135 are the ones that are active. So there have been projects in that journey that fell away that are no longer counted in the 135 because they're not active anymore. One of the things I would say to that question is, I know the current hype is about AI, and I know the reality is that AI can deliver on its hype, but there is always something around the corner. And I think it's really important not to get completely enveloped in the current, because especially for technologies, companies like ours, around the corner matters a lot. So when you're thinking about training people and you're thinking about solution development, we tend to not only look at what's in front of us, which is Gen AI, but also what's around the corner.
You're a public company, and so every quarter you're reporting to your shareholders and to analysts who are ultimately interested in financial performance and less interested in the AI-centric view that we're talking through today, which I suppose creates another layer of challenge as you're thinking how to balance all of this.
They are and they're not. There's an old adage that if you follow analyst desires, you will follow them right off a cliff, because you will always be doing the things that increase your revenue or your profit this week, but it means that you won't be investing for the future. So you really have to do a combination of both. And the best analysts know that really, really well. So the best analysts are not only talking to you, and that's true for investment analysts, it's also true for industry analysts, whether it's a Gartner or Everest or any of those really quality analysts. So we tend to have to mix in, the best company is not only looking at what's the art of the present, but also what is around the corner. For us, the art of the possible around the corner is quantum. And we're doing quite a lot of work in quantum now, even though if you talk to most CEOs, they assume that is 4 to 5 to 6 years away. In some respects, it is. And in some respects, it's actually available right now. And most people don't fully understand that.
On the subject of quantum, when you say it's available right now, can you describe some practical use cases? Because we all, as you said, we all hear in the background, quantum is coming and it's going to change everything, but we don't hear about practical use cases very often.
NVIDIA is, of course, a company that a lot of people are paying attention to and looking at their market cap. But NVIDIA really, that did not happen overnight. That happened because they had the foresight to really decide that they were going to create chips that were extremely available for generative AI use. And they didn't create those chips overnight, nor have people been able to replicate what they did overnight. So it really is a question of, it seems like a little bit of an overnight success from a market valuation standpoint, but it's anything but an overnight success. And so that is why companies, I think, really do have to look around the corner. So on the subject of quantum, I kind of think of it in three buckets. There is what most people think of in quantum as general purpose quantum computing. And when you read articles, most quantum is about that. So you hear about qubits, and there are multiple countries as well as companies that are getting more and more advanced stability with more qubits. That's the way you kind of measure a general purpose quantum computing. Most general wisdom is that we haven't, as a society, gotten to the level of stability we need for really functional general purpose computing that is quantum. And the question is, well, when does that happen? And the standard answer used to be 15 years or 10 years. The standard answer now is we really don't know, which is an indication that it may be sooner, but we don't know. General purpose computing is an interesting idea, and one that Unisys has played a role in. In 1946, the first general purpose digital computer was called the ENIAC, which was built by Unisys. And the first commercial computers were the UNIVAC and a similar competitor from IBM in 1949, 1950. So we're headed into another world now where you're going to have that general purpose quantum computer, but it's not here yet. The other two elements are more current. And so let's talk about another quantum computer called quantum annealing. So quantum annealing is a subset of quantum that is very specific for optimization problems. Here, you have already achieved sustainable qubit numbers, because it's not everything to all people. It's very, very specific. So we at Unisys have taken quantum annealing, which is already mature, and we have used it in optimization solutions. So our logistics solution, which is called, funnily, Unisys Logistics Optimization, what a name, really takes advantage of quantum annealing. Optimization is something that can be done right now with quantum computing. So that is the second of the three categories. The third category is what we call post-quantum cryptography. And post-quantum cryptography is really defensive quantum. That is using software and using different algorithms to protect your data or protect your software from the coming onslaught of quantum computing. Because the general perception is that when quantum computing becomes available, current levels of encryption in most encryption will be at risk. So you want to protect yourself for when quantum becomes available. And the key question there is, why bother now? So, why do that today when quantum may not come for some number of years? The answer is because bad guys are stealing your data today, and bad guys are stealing your software today. And although current encryption may be sufficient against classical computers, it won't be sufficient against quantum. So if something gets stolen today, will it still be relevant when they can take that and break it in the future? So the current view is you want to protect yourself as quickly as you can so that the things that are stolen today or next year are not available to the people who want to break that encryption when they get quantum computing. So that's the third element of what people are talking about in quantum. NIST, which is putting forth standards in this post-quantum cryptography for the future, has actually had an ongoing effort in this for about 4.5 years. And they have said that they intend to release standards this summer. So this is something that is quite current.
So, for organizations that do want to start preparing right now, what should they do?
That first level of general purpose quantum is still a bit beyond reach. The second level of using specialized quantum, such as quantum annealing, is available right now, and we're taking advantage of that. So if you have an optimization issue or challenge, whether it's in logistics or financial services or even retail or healthcare, you can solve optimization questions using quantum now. And then post-quantum cryptography is something that some companies are already putting in place. So Apple is putting it in place, Microsoft is putting it in place, but we're all going to have to do that. And some companies have started doing that ahead of the NIST standards. Others are kind of waiting for the NIST standards to come out, but those standards, I mean, we're close to the end of the summer. So those standards really are expected to come out very soon.
Let's talk about digital transformation, which I realize is no longer the sexy topic that it once was. Now it's been replaced by AI, of course. However, there is an enormous amount of money that is being invested in transformation. You just described one form of transformation, which is logistics, but there's also transformation in the workplace. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
It may be the biggest challenge that I have as CEO of a company, and I think probably the biggest challenge of most companies. And the challenge there, Michael, is fear. To be very simple, even technology companies have to deal with people who are fearful of their job becoming redundant. They don't really know what's going to happen over the next 5 to 10 years. And if you're about ready to end your career, those people tend to be less fearful. If you're just starting in the job workforce, you tend to be less fearful because you're current and you feel like you can catch the wave. But if you're, somebody who's been in the market for 20 years or 25 years, you're pretty fearful in general. And so I think one of the jobs of a company, whether it's ours or anybody else, is to lower the fear. And you do that by educating, you do that by training, you do that by emphasizing career mobility inside the company. You say, okay, well, these jobs are opening up, and how are we going to get you trained to take advantage of that new job? Interestingly, AI is critical for that effort too. So as you think about workforce management and you think about how you get the data and how you process the data to know what jobs are coming online and how do you train people for those jobs and how do you match, AI is perfect for that. So in an interesting way, it's using generative AI to help you lower the fear for people who are fearful about what happens to AI in their jobs. So it all kind of makes sense, but it's not initially intuitive.
We have another question from Arsalan Khan on very much this topic. And he says, organizational transformation requires a balance between strategy, politics, innovation, culture, and execution, SPICE. Since you are at the top, how do you make people aware that politics can derail potentially successful projects? And let me broaden that to just the general question of politics. And I think it goes back to forces against innovation that we were talking about earlier as well.
If politics means people in the company who are seen as political in the sense that they're seen as promoting themselves and using their influence to get other people to say good things about them, a good organization, in my opinion, has that's a zero tolerance. You simply can't allow people to use the organization for their personal gains. It really has to be everybody rowing in the same direction for the company's benefit. And you kind of know when you're at a company, in my experience, whether the company allows those kind of people or has no tolerance for those. And we don't have a tolerance for those. There'll always be some. And you basically say, sorry, that doesn't work here. The broader question about all of those different elements, which are completely accurate, and how do you actually manage all of those elements at once? My advice would be don't get too cute about it. Be as transparent as possible, because you can't manage on all of those variables at the same time. You have to, but you can't possibly be successful if you're not being transparent. So, this is an old adage of Winston Churchill's of, tell people what you're going to tell them, and then tell them that you've told them. And that sounds repetitive, but it's really not. And I think as long as you're transparent with the company and the people in the company is where you want to go, where you want to take it, and everybody says, okay, I hear you. And so I'm not going to be surprised. I want to do this. I think people will come along with that. I really do.
As CEO, the management or the encouragement of culture ultimately falls to you. How do you think about that aspect of your role?
There are different companies that are organized differently. I believe in a servant leadership culture. I do believe that the more people you have that you have direct responsibility for, as well as the technically higher up in the organization, the more you have to spend your time helping the organization, helping people succeed. We just announced earlier this week. Two people in our organization are getting new roles that are significant advancements for them. So I sent a note to those two people saying, okay, I'm here to help. How can I help you? And, that's the first instinct I have, which is how do we help the people in the organization succeed? That's an element of servant leadership. When COVID occurred in 2020, I kind of made a personal commitment that I was going to have a video call one-on-one with everybody in the company who came down with COVID. And I had, I don't know, 2,500 calls. In hindsight, that took a lot of time. But it also, I hope, showed the organization we deeply cared about how this affected every individual. So I don't know if that was the right thing or the wrong thing to do, but I do think that how you show servant leadership is really important for a culture of a company. We call that our let me help culture here, which is really about helping each other.
So that let me help culture is something that is defined. People are aware of it. It's accepted inside the organization, and people expect that's the way it is.
We live in a world of instantaneous communication. We live in a world of town halls where the entire company can be on a town hall. We do those on a quarterly basis. But every once in a while, you have to sit back and say, how do we do it in an old-fashioned way that is more powerful and people pay attention? I have for years and years now had a monthly email, which is my way of communicating to the company every month, and it's what's on my mind. Sometimes it's about things outside the company, sometimes it's about the company, but it is really a one-to-many communication. And people respond to that email, and I basically told them, hey, I'm going to get back to you within 24 hours. Because it has to be not a send communication, but a dialogue, but it's very personal. And I think the more we have impersonal means of communicating, the more important it is to say we can rise above that and we can keep it very personal. People stay at a company because of the relationships they make. We had a celebration earlier this morning of someone who was retiring from the company after 42 years. Okay. And, I got on the call and was on it for an hour. And we had people throughout the company who had worked with this individual in his 42-year career. That was important for the person, but it was really important for the other people on the call to see how much we celebrate that kind of thing. So I think making it personal matters in a fairly impersonal world.
So I'm assuming it would be fair to say that the maintenance of culture, the demonstration of servant leadership, and also leading by example is very important to you, and therefore you're willing to invest significant amount of your personal time in that.
A series of books written by an author named Pat Lencioni, and I like Pat, and I've kind of become a little bit of a student of his because he has this idea of a team one, and I've used it in all the companies I've been privileged to be associated with, and it's an interesting element. So you take my direct reports. So the CFO, the head marketing officer, the head of HR, the head of legal, and you, the head of technology, the head of operations, and you take that team and you ask them who their team members are. And most of the time, Michael, in most companies, even in ours, in an off-guard moment, they will say, well, I'm the head of marketing. I have X number of people. I have Y budget. That's my team. That's an answer, but it's not the best answer. The best answer is for that head of marketing to know that his or her team are the other people who report to the CEO. And if they think and act like the other people, whether it's the CEO or the CFO, if that senior team thinks that it is their team one, the whole company will get that message. And all of a sudden, what used to be stovepipes will be a very, very flexible, because all of those other organizations will be very, very comfortable moving laterally into these other organizations and communicating. And what you really want from a company is not stovepipes. You really want that lateral communication. And that does start at every level. So when I go to my chief financial officer and I say, who are your best team members? And they refer to the head of operations and head of marketing and head of finance and head of HR, that's the answer I'm looking for.
You want that organizational fluidity, which will then automatically, if it's done well, break down the silos.
That's right. And ultimately, you want an organization that not only can react quickly, but can leverage itself so that you, on a project by project basis, you may have a very senior person in the company on a project working with a much more junior person, and that junior person is the project leader. So inside our organization, we don't have titles. We don't talk about vice presidents or senior vice presidents. We do that in press releases to the outside world. But inside the organization, you won't hear us talk about titles. You'll hear us talk about functionals and what a person functionally does. But we really try to avoid titles if at all possible.
Which is a step towards helping create the psychology and the culture of flattening that organization.
Correct, because it looks odd for a senior vice president to report to a director on a project. Well, so they're not. Don't call them that. Just have them as people, and all of a sudden that becomes a much more effective project.
Doing whatever makes sense for that particular project.
And having the leader as the right leader for that project, even if the leader is more junior, which it often is.
This is a question from Elizabeth Shaw, and Elizabeth says, how important is it for an organization to simplify its enterprise technology? How can they do so with minimal disruption and risk while continuing to operate, especially when running a mix of legacy and modern technology?
Legacy technology, we tend to call now technical debt. That's the term we tend to use for that. Our chief information officer inside our company deals with that every day. And, where we have really come to consolidate, we have a consolidation project. We reported to the board about it last week. It is really kind of how do we work through that to get the objective of simplification is correct. It makes cybersecurity easier to protect. It makes efficiency easier to monitor. It makes rolling out new generations of technology easier. It's just better. What we tend to do at the company is we give people a warning. We basically say, hey, we have 10 software programs that do about the same thing. But in 3 months, there are going to be 2. And you can pick from the 2, but you have 3 months to move from one of the other 8 over into the 2. And that's all you get. And what we find is, as long as you give people some reasonable notice, then they have some opportunity to move into the programs that are really your go forward programs. And that's the way we tend to work it. But you have to be very thoughtful about it. And if you don't have a very specific plan to do that, then you're going to be stuck with technical debt for a long, long time.
We have a question from LinkedIn from Greg Walters, who says, what is your perspective on the current AI disillusionment versus the AI hype? And is this disillusion itself hype? So AI disillusionment versus hype. And I'll ask you to answer relatively quickly because we're just going to run out of time.
The answer is yes. So AI hype had part reality, part hype. AI disillusionment has part hype and part reality. There is not a question that in the long term, AI, including generative AI, will significantly change the way a lot of companies work and solutions we give to consumers and to other companies. It is going to matter. I do think, going back to my around the corner, one of the things that will take AI hype and really put it on steroids, if you will allow the analogy, is the combination of AI in its current form on a computing platform that is much more powerful. So you've already heard me talk about AI combined with stuff in the future will actually deliver more than we have today. But even AI on classical computing is real, and ignore it at your peril.
Let's jump to CIOs. As CEO of Unisys, I know you spend time with CIOs, with CEOs, CFOs. In this environment of AI, driven by AI, where does that leave the CIO? What is the CIO role today?
The CIOs now have stuff in their domain that is of great interest to the CEOs and CMOs and the CCOs and the CFOs. So this is the time for CIOs to shine. This is the time not to be defensive. This is the time to show your stuff. And I will tell you, this is a time to one of the great skills of a superior CIO is not to get trapped in engineering speak and not to get trapped in functions, but actually to be able to communicate in a way that a non-expert, the rest of the C-levels, can understand the value and opportunity you're providing. So a CIO is almost a translator from all of the specific engineering skills that they have. CEOs don't want to hear about technical debt, but CEOs do want to understand what are the business solutions that advance the company if you can be successful in a good consolidation project. So this is a real moment for CIOs.
It's difficult for a CIO to fully put in place and think through the strategy of technology that will support revenue or strategic goals of the company, because the CIO's time is spent focused on the tech, not on the business strategy.
What we have done with our CIO, and what I would suggest most companies should do, is take 25% of that person's time and get them out of Dodge. So have your CIO talk to your clients. Have your CIO talk to the rest of the industry. Don't be so introverted, because I think the skills you get from talking to clients and meeting with clients and prospects are the skills you need as a CIO to talk to your CEO and to your board. So I agree with you, Michael, but the answer to that is get out of the office and start spending more of your time in the outside world.
So really, for a CIO, however you do it, you need to have that broader lens.
And that's the difference between a C-level executive and a non-C-level executive. And it's time for the CIOs to take their place at the C-level. It really is.
We have yet another question from Arsalan Khan, who says, he read somewhere that the average lifespan of executives is about 3 years. How do you make an organization aware that it's about the idea and the strategy even after the executive has left? And we've all seen great projects that died on the vine because the sponsor left and all that investment was wasted?
I don't have an answer to that. I can tell you that the data is right. The average lifespan is 3 to 5 years. That is not necessarily the best answer for a company. So, I mean, I talked about an executive we had who left after 42 years this morning. It wasn't a C-level executive, but it was somebody who really made a difference at the shop. And so I would tell you, I kind of rue that. And I don't have an answer for that other than it shouldn't be the right answer. I think if you have a culture where people are actively engaged and they see the contribution they're making and they're able to make that contribution, you should do better than 3 years.
What advice do you have to folks working in an organization, could be middle managers, on being successful and developing their career from your point of view as CEO?
Be excited about what you do and be willing to change what you do inside an organization to be excited. Most people hesitate because they're good at something and they're afraid of not being great at the next thing, so they never evolve. Whether you're changing companies or whether you're working inside of a company, evolving yourself and your skills is critical. So you have to evolve if you move to another company. Well, evolve within the company. And if you're in the company and you can't evolve and you wake up in the morning and you're not happy with what you're doing, go somewhere else. Find a place where you can be happy, because life is too short for you not to be happy. But give your organization a chance, because they most likely want you to stay, and you could probably have a better career inside that organization if you're willing to evolve. But if it doesn't work for you, then move on.
I love that. It's great advice to be open to change and be willing to change and adapt.
Yep. Well, thank you, Michael.
With that, we are out of time. A huge thank you to Peter Altabef. He is the chair and CEO of Unisys. Peter, I'm very grateful to you. Thank you for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
And a huge thank you to everybody who listened, especially you folks who asked such great questions. Before you go, please subscribe to our newsletter and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We have amazing shows coming up. Check it out. Check out CXOTalk.com. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great day. Bye-bye.